Hello and welcome to another edition of COVID Calls. I'm your host, Christian Peregin, and I'm really sorry that we're a bit late. We're meant to start at 4:30, but we had some technical difficulties, which is COVID life, always the same. But anyway, today we have two really interesting guests. We have the Minister for Industrial and Employment Relations, Carmelo Abela, and we also have the Director General of the DIER, which is as far as I know, the Department of Industrial and Employment Relations, Diane Vella Muscat. And today's session is going to be a Q&A. So I'm just going to bring both of our guests into the stream. Okay, can you hear me? Can you see me, Diane?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Aħna ħan nitkellmu bl-Ingliż u bil-Malti li jkun bażikament. So if you have any questions, send us the questions on Facebook. What we want to be discussing today is what employers and employees can do in the case of what we're experiencing today. So as we know, there are many employers who have taken a massive hit in terms of business, and they're trying to reflect that either through redundancies or as a last resort, or through cuts in salaries, or through 4-hour work weeks and things like that. So yes, those of you who are asking, you can just ask the questions and I will divert them to our guests. Ministru, forsi nistgħu nibdew bik. Maybe we can start with you, and you can explain to us what are the general rights employees and employers have when it comes to these issues. So what is the government's role in terms of regulation? Why is there an involvement of government in terms of how employers and employees can deal with these sort of issues?
Well, thank you very much, Chris. First of all, I think the point of departure is the last meeting of the MCSD, where all the social partners, which is government, representatives of the unions, representatives of workers, the unions, and the employers, we met and discussed the issue, the current issue, the COVID-19 scenario, and basically we agreed on the third financial package that the government announced through the Prime Minister Robert Abela, in fact, that same evening. So that is the point of departure. During that meeting, there was an agreement between all social partners that the government will fork out €800 for each employee. And as a minimum, employers agreed to, as a minimum, fork out €400, which means that the salaries that reach 1,200, they are hopefully guaranteed to have that amount. If the employer wants to fork out even more money for those who are paid higher salaries and wages, they are of course free to do so, if they can. So that is the point of departure. Then the department, by law, is a department that safeguards the interests of all. Basically, it's not only the interests of the workers, but also the interests of the employers, which means that especially the employees need to be safeguarded from having less rights according to the law. And in this current scenario, we are the go-in-between, sort of, to abide by the agreement during the last meeting of the Malta Council for Economic and Social Development, MCSD. And of course, bearing in mind that the current situation is very difficult for most businesses as well. Some are shut down, some...
In fact, I'd like to get Diane's take on this. Diane, you've obviously been receiving many applications from businesses who want to make some changes to the conditions of their employees, right? First of all, why do employers come to you? So they come for some sort of certificate that allows them to do this legally. What's in it for them?
When an employer enters into an obligation, an employment contract with employees, there is a contract which is stipulated at least by the minimum which the employment law guarantees in Malta. So obviously that means that any employment contract in Malta can go above, but cannot obviously go beyond the minimum that which the law stipulates. Now, in this particular case, we can say it's a kind of a force majeure situation. Many, as the minister rightly said, many employers have partial or even all of their business operations suspended. So they are faced with a situation where they are faced with this dilemma of wanting to keep their employees, but at the same time they cannot guarantee what they have obliged and what the obligations in the contract are. So to go against or to go less than what the contract stipulates, they need to go to the regulator, which in the case of Malta is the DIER, so that we see the case and we see the justifications and we guarantee this safety net for both employers and the employee as a temporary solution.
I think it's worth saying as well that if an employer is if an employer doesn't if an employer takes a decision, right, and it's not done legally, so to speak, then the employer is exposed obviously by that decision, right? And really the employee can, so the clarity is very important, right, for there to be this clarity.
That's
so
right.
we have some questions and maybe we can go through them. So someone asked about can your employer impose on you to work 40 hours and pay you for 20 hours? What choice does one have? So as we know, one of the measures many businesses are taking are trying to lower their cost base, trying to reduce salaries, for example. But does that mean employees have to work the same number of hours? What are the parameters behind that?
So the first question which I would ask is, what kind of business are we speaking about? Is it something which is, for example, directly affected with tourism? So it's obvious that the operations went down. Why are you still working 40 hours and paying you less? So we have to see what the cause and reasons behind that to be able to answer the question. But if there are businesses which actually operations went on as usual, and they still have their income coming, even employers, not only employees. So in those circumstances, for each and every hour worked, the employee has to get the salary and all the entitlements as per the employment contract.
Okay. Minister, if you want to clarify any of that as well, feel free. Someone is asking about part-time self-employed. I mean, there isn't much of a developed question there, but maybe I can ask you this: from the applications that you've seen so far, what are people requesting most of? Is it so? Do people come to you to request redundancies, for example, or is that not really happening?
My problem is that I'm not listening to Diane what she's saying.
Okay, so there's a bit of an issue with that. Diane, maybe you can answer. How many have you approved so far, for example?
So to answer your question, the vast majority are employers who invested in their people and they want to keep the people on board. Even from the side of the unions and employee representatives, they are working towards this common goal, and that's a very positive, even considering the current circumstances. So we started around about mid-March by issuing the first permit. So practically in a month's time, we issued over 200 permits, so 200 companies, and we are processing nearly another 100 at the moment. Obviously, because the workload is all the time increasing, especially with the opening last week of our free phone numbers. The vast majority, they are asking for a reduction in hours. It varies from 4-day week to 2-day week to even up to 15 hours a week. This means that the rest, the employee is either using his own vacation leave or going on unpaid, and then obviously matching that with the government schemes such as the ones which Malta Enterprise are giving.
What about the people who are being told not to go to work because maybe they're pregnant or they're vulnerable, etc., but their employers are still operating? Like maybe you're I don't know, a pregnant woman working at a supermarket. What kind of advice are you giving employees in that sense?
Okay.
Ministru, go ahead.
Yes. Naħseb fiċ-ċirkustanzi attwali rridu nżommu qudiem għajnejna anke s-sens komun. Jiġifieri dik hija importanti ħafna. Jiġifieri qegħdin mument diffiċli li jfisser li kulħadd irid jerfa' parti mill-pis, il-gvern qed jerfa' pis sostanzjali x'qed joħroġ il-miljuni u qed jagħmel effort anki finanzjarju, jiġifieri anki b'self apposta u anke qed naħdmu mal-banek u l-Kummissjoni Ewropea tagħti il-go-ahead tagħha biex inkunu nistgħu il-gvern jidħol garanti mal-banek. Ġifieri l-isforz qiegħed hemmhekk bejn kulħadd. Il-gvern fuq quddiem net naturalment min ħaddem ukoll għalhekk nirreferi dejjem għall-ftehim li kien hemm fil-MCSD għax min ħaddem ukoll intrabat li jerfa' l-pis u parti mill-pis ukoll. U l-ħaddiema ukoll sfortunatament ser ikollhom jaraw anke ċertu uħud minnhom għall-inqas jew ħafna minnhom tnaqqis anke fil-paga. Jiġifieri minħabba ċirkustanzi li qed nissoponi li kienet anke tispjega Diane aktar qabel. Però l-iktar ħaġa importanti hi li għall-inqas niggarantixxu li jkun hemm dħul għal ħaddiema. Jiġifieri għalhekk il-minimu ta' 800 euro li se jitħallas mill-gvern. Plus hopefully jiġi supplementat ukoll skont il-paga ta' kull ħaddim individwali x'hekk inti taqla 1000 euro fix-xahar normalment. 800 se joħroġhom il-gvern, il-200 se joħroġhom l-employer tiegħek. U allura hemmhekk tiġi l-paga ta' 1000 euro. Jiġifieri irdu wkoll nużaw ħafna is-sens komun, però irdu nkunu nżommu quddiem għajnejna l-ħin kollu li kulħadd ser ikun qed ibati biċċa. Jiġifieri mhux qed nistennew li kollox jibqa' għaddej business as usual meta għaddej minn dik ċirkostanza partikolari. Sinti għamilt mistoqsija fuq persuni li huma vulnerabbli. Mela, il-gvern ukoll anke hemmhekk għamel diversi għajnuniet għal persuni li qegħdin fis-settur privat fejn dawk li huma fis-settur privat jekk persuna vulnerabbli rċivit karta li hi ma tistax tmur għax-xogħol għax għandha kundizzjoni medika u allura hija meqjusa bħala persuna vulnerabbli, dik il-karta tittuljar l-employer tagħha u l-employer tagħha naturalment tkompli ħallas is-salarju ta' dik il-persuna. Dejjem jekk jiddependi wkoll miċ-ċirkustanzi kollha. Jiġifieri issa l-employer jista' ma jistax nassumi Diane kienet qed tispjega wkoll li jiddependi naturalment liema attività ekonomika għax inti għandek l-iskema A u l-iskema B li huma mħaddma mill-Malta Enterprise u allura jiddependi f'liema tkun kategorija tkun qed taqa'. Jiġifieri
ħanibdew mill-bidu. Jiġifieri jekk employer irid jagħmel dan it-tip ta' deċiżjoni, whatever. L-ewwel net irid jitkellem mal-impjegati l-ewwel jew irid jitkellem mal-DIER l-ewwel?
Irid jitkellem mal-impjegati jekk ikollok union għax ikun hemm union tirrappreżenta l-ħaddiema titkellem mal-union. Jekk m'hemmx union titkellem mal-impjegati jew rappreżentant tal-impjegati maħtur minn fost l-impjegati, però mbagħad irid imur għand id-dipartiment. Jiġifieri id-dipartiment ser saqsi dejjem mela inti bħal employer ġejt għandek bil mal-union jew ma' rappreżentant tal-ħaddiema, tkellimtu flimkien, wasaltu għal xi forma ta' konklużjoni, jiġifieri anke jekk l-employer ma jitkellimx mal-rappreżentanti tal-ħaddiema, id-dipartiment dejjem se jisaqsi jekk hemmx il-qbil ta' min jirrappreżenta lil ħaddiema.
Okay, so some people are asking for some translations in English because we obviously have an international audience watching this as well with a lot of expats who work. And what the minister is saying basically is that the first step needs to be for employers to have a conversation with the employees, because when the employer goes to the DIER, when it goes to the department to get a certificate that allows this change in contract, they're going to ask them for some agreement with either the employees or the unions, right? So that's the first step, right? And then I guess the second step is how does the 800 euro benefit or the 160 euro benefit, how does that impact the company. So Diane, maybe you can answer this. If a company is getting the €800 benefit or the Annex B benefit, that's considerably lower. Do they and they want to also supplement that with a decrease in salaries or a decrease in the work week? Can they do that, or is one conflicting with the other?
One is actually not conflicting because many people, yes, are getting confused. One is actually complementary to the other in the sense that the law is there to protect both the employer and the employee, and even given the possibility to adapt in such circumstances to have, for example, a lesser hour week, as we were speaking about. But then that is further supplemented by the operator that is it doesn't have a legal obligation in terms of employment law, but the government is having these schemes which complement and which aid even more the employers and obviously the employees through this difficult time. In fact, what we are advising the companies when they first come to us is, have you done your homework? Do you know if you fall under an XA or an XB? Because sometimes a company might not even be clear about that, and then they have to work in accordance, having a clear mind of what the income and what schemes apply to them. That's the homework that they have to do.
And you said already that there are permits that have been granted. From these, how long does it take you to do this? So I had a question: what's the average amount of time that an application will take to be processed?
These kind of permits, if we even had to take at a gate, were rarely issued by the department because obviously we never faced. We had to adapt, basically, Chris. We had to adapt the whole workforce, obviously to help with the economy. We cannot stay there and weeks pass and do anything about them. So we are in a couple of days or maximum week or week and a half, depending on the situation and depends on the homework that the employers do. That means that the faster they work on getting their figures, on speaking to the employees, knowing what schemes they apply for, they help us so that we can help them in return to issue the permit. And we are issuing the permits for 4 weeks. This is important to say. Why? Because we are doing a review. Now we're starting already with the first lot because things changed even from 4 weeks ago till today. Things are so much changing on a fast pace that we have to review every 4 weeks.
Okay. Ministru, intom għandkom ukoll naħseb customer care line, u xek, ħriġtu xi numri biex in-nies jistgħu jċemplu wkoll?
Il-helpline li huma l-ħaddiema tad-dipartiment li mmexxija minn Diane fil-fatt li il-helpline jieħdu ssib jirrispondu. Ħanna two helplines, wieħed għall-ħaddiema 1575 u l-1576 huwa għall-employers. We have two helplines. One is for those workers who wish to know about their rights and whether their employers are telling them or abusing from this situation, maybe, or have some queries. Let's put it that way. So it's 1575 for employees, and for employers it's 1576. And employers can call to see what they can do in the current scenario and whether the department will be willing to, let's say, to agree or not with their requests, or whether they need to go back to the drawing board, sort of, and maybe they are not aware exactly of the procedure. Maybe they are not aware that the workers need to agree and to be involved. And or they can also take into consideration other ways of doing things rather than what they intended to present or propose to the department.
So we said before what the first step for an employer should be, which is to have a discussion with the employees, right? If an employee is told, listen, this decision has been taken and they haven't had that conversation with the employees, what should the employees' first step be? To call the helpline or to speak to the employer? What do you suggest?
Well, in the first place, the department will not accept their proposal unless the employees are involved in that.
And what if the employer doesn't go to the department? What if the employer just does this? What are the employees' rights over there? Maybe Diane can help as well.
Well, just one simple sentence is that the employees can call the department, and that is why we have the helpline 1575 specifically for employees, so they can ask if they are seeing that their rights are, or their conditions of work have changed, and they didn't know about that or were not consulted about that. If in that case, they can call the department on 1575 or send an email on info@dier.gov.mt.
Okay, info at let's say it again, Diane.
info.dir@gov.mt. It even took me a while to remember by heart, so no worries about that.
Let's see if it appears well on the screen. Is that it?
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
So guys, you can check out that email address and use that besides the helplines. A couple of other questions that we're seeing. For example, could your employer force you to take leave at the moment, right? Irrespective of you not wanting to take leave for it. Diane, what's the question? What's the issue when it comes to leave?
Mm-hmm. So take a normal day of work without COVID-19. To actually have your vacation leave, you need to get it approved by your employer, right? So in this case, the same applies. The employer can actually force you to take vacation leave, maybe in current circumstances, or to have it associated with shutdown. Usually we had shutdown, no, where the employer forces during the period of August and December certain days which the employee takes as vacation leave. The same concept applies here. So they can take the leave from which they brought forward from 2019 and the pro rata up till now of 2020. If there is an agreement and the employee and the employer continue to take vacation leave, which has not yet even accrued, the Jafiri, till the end of 2020, they can do so. However, if the employee leaves or resigns or is made redundant for some reason or another, then that does not accrue a civil debt versus the employer. In simple words, then the employer cannot say to the employee, you have to pay me back for the leave which I have forced you to take. I'm not sure if I made myself clear.
When it comes to forced leave, does the employer have to go to the department anyway for a permit?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No.
Okay, so that's something they can handle themselves.
Yes. They need to advise the employee, and obviously there need to be a special circumstance. But in this moment in time, it's enough justified reason, no?
So the department comes involved when you're talking about reduced hours or reduced salaries or even redundancies.
Redundancies, if they are collective, yes. If they are from 10 persons or more, yes. Because then the last in, first out principle applies.
So if a company is getting rid of 10 people or more, they have to come to the department to discuss that with you first. They cannot just take that decision themselves.
Not to discuss, but because there are certain principles, like I was saying, the last in, first out, and then there is the obligation that if you make people redundant, they have 1 year period where the employer has to call in the same employees if the same post arises again.
Okay. Let's just see if there are any more questions that we received here. I mean, someone is asking about the Malta pilots as well. That Minister, maybe you can help with that. We heard that Malta laid off many of its pilots recently today. when you get laid off like this, as in, is there any resort you can take? I mean, obviously, Air Malta cannot be employing pilots if it's not flying airplanes there, I guess. But what are the considerations that can be taken?
Well, the considerations are the same as Diane was saying. I mean, what applies for each and every company applies also for Air Malta. It's evident that we have issues in our country, like in every other country where the economies are in a stalemate, if I can use this terminology. So it's the company prerogative to any company prerogative to do so, and I'm not only talking about Air Malta, given that they abide by the law and the conditions in this respect.
What about some people are asking about third country nationals? There's a question, does this only apply to EU citizens? Diane, maybe you can explain, as a department, do you make any distinction between the nationalities of
No, not at all, Chris. One of the basic principles enshrined in employment law is actually not to make any discrimination based on race, age, gender, what have you. When there is a contract between an employer and an employee, then ceteris paribus, all other things are equal.
Okay, and we have another question related to the one we were asking before. Does an employer not need to go to DIER for forced unpaid leave as well? So you said that it's not necessary to come to the department for forced vacation leave, but when it comes to forced unpaid leave, do they have to?
Yes, they have to, because the difference is a vacation leave is based on the normal working hours. That means when you are taking vacation leave, whether it is forced or not, you are still entitled to your basic salary, statutory bonuses, and you are accruing leave. So all other things apply equally. But when we're speaking of unpaid leave, then you are decreasing the conditions that we were speaking before. So in case of unpaid leave, whether it is 1 day or 5 days a week, then yes, you need to come to the department.
Okay, and also we had some reports of people. I don't know if this falls within your remit, but I imagine it's one of the questions you get. When there are companies that are still asking their employees to work from the office, either because they don't agree with teleworking or because the job cannot be done through teleworking, but the employees could feel very, very frustrated by that situation and very concerned from a health perspective. What do you tell these people?
As much as possible, we suggest that telework is in place. There are even people, employers, who have done a general policy nowadays on telework. And the telework law, in fact, has been with us for quite a number of years, and it has come to good use in these days. But unless it is the quarantine is obligatory, then you cannot impose telework as a condition. But obviously, other safety precautions which are advertised by our health professionals have to be followed.
Some people are asking, do you have to work for the 800 euros the government has given us? So if you, Minister, hold on. Okay, go ahead.
What do you mean? Do you have to work? What exactly?
So the 800 euro benefit is being given to companies that are basically shut down, right? To be able to keep them sort of in employment. But do they actually have to go? Do they have to do some form of work or not? If they're not doing any work, do they still get that 800? If their employer asks them to do work, would they not?
No, let's be practical. I mean, let's take a hotel. Most of them are closed now. Some of them took the opportunity maybe to do some refurbishment, and their employees are helping in the same refurbishment. They are going to work. I mean, even if they are going to work for 3 or 4 days instead of the usual days, they are still reporting to their place of work, and they have to be paid accordingly. Now, the 800 euros are being given to employers for them to give them to their employees. So it's not a question of, you have to report to your usual place of work. They are being given even if the employee is at home, because it depends on each and every circumstance when it comes to different activities. I mean,
And the top up of this €400 over and above the 800, for example, is that compulsory?
well, I started in my first intervention referring to the agreement that we have or we had at MCSD. I mean, all social partners were there, and everyone agreed that the employers will try to reach as a minimum the 400 contribution, €400 contribution for each and every employer, of course, depending on the salary.
But it's actually not. But it's actually not compulsory, right? Since
Well, I mean, it's if you ask me if it's by law or not, it's one thing. But we had the discussion at MCSD where all the social partners agreed that they will make their utmost, each and every company, to fork out as a minimum €400, of course, depending on your salary. If you earn €1,000, as I said earlier, you're not expected to be paid 800 and 400 from your employer. You're expected to be paid the 800 from the government and the 200 from your employer. So, but yes, there was an agreement, and hopefully everyone abides by that agreement.
we have another question, which is why can't the benefits be given to employees directly rather than through employers?
I think it's only an administrative thing. It's easier to give it to the employer, and then the employer gives it to its employee. So it's more of an administrative and practical thing rather.
Someone from the Macedonian community is asking what will happen with the Macedonian workers who find a job, but because of the decision of the government, if they apply for first time, their application will not be accepted. Find the question a bit.
If they apply now, you mean, or if they were already here employed?
Yeah, I guess the best advice is for them to call the helpline, right, to get into the specific case.
Online or
ID
otherwise,
Malta.
Identity Malta depends what exactly is the question.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
ID Malta, you said?
Identity
Yes.
Malta, yes, because they give the permits, but it depends what exactly is the question. Maybe I didn't listen exactly what was.
So yeah, like I think we're coming to the end of this shortly anyway, and there's a lot of questions to go through. But if your question hasn't yet been answered or it isn't answered by the we're being told the first time minister.
First, yes, but first time. I mean, he didn't arrive now, maybe, or he applied before all this COVID-19 started. I don't know exactly, or he lost his job and found another one within 10 days, because he can, or they can, if they, and the permit is still valid, of course. Maybe he can either contact the department on 1575 or send an email, or contact Identity Malta if it is an issue that concerns permits for residence and work permit.
We have a question. I'll just read it out. I normally work part-time with a government company. I tried to contact my employer to apply for the government scheme, and he don't want to because he doesn't want to give us 4.5 hours per week only. With small kids, I can't have that wage only. How can I apply for wage supplement if my employer doesn't want to? I found many departments, and they told me they don't know what I can do. So in this case, if I'm understanding correctly, there's resistance from the company to apply for these schemes. Diane, are you seeing any of this? Do you have any companies who are not willing to apply for these schemes?
No, actually, what we're seeing from our end is the other way around. Some companies which maybe do not fall under an XA but fall under an XB who want to fall under an XA. Because why wouldn't an employer want to benefit from such help? I can't see the reasoning behind it.
Okay. Also, what is going to happen? We've got another question. What's going to happen after the 2 months pass? Will the government continue to be giving this benefit? And I think I can widen that question actually, because I know the answer obviously is going to be that it needs to be sort of reviewed, and then we see where we go. But I believe this is also a responsibility for employers, right, Diane? That any changes that are made need to be reviewed every 4 weeks, right? What is the time?
Of course. Ahead, it needs to be reviewed. It's also stated in every permit which we are issuing, but we are even making a step forward. We are contacting ourselves, these employers, and we're speaking to them to see in which situation, if they are still in the same situation, if the situation got a bit worse, etc., etc. And we'll be following each and every 4 weeks till we start seeing then a slight improvement each and every time. And things go back to normal.
Yeah. So look, it's been more than half an hour. I think we need to wrap up. Unfortunately, there's a lot more questions coming in, but I'm sure this is something that this is why you have your helpline and your email address, right? I think maybe if you can just have some closing remarks, and I'll start with you, Diane, and then I'll move on to the minister. This is obviously a time of uncertainty for both employees and employers. And your job is to make sure there isn't abuse, right? I imagine though you're dealing with them with both sides of this equation every day. What does it tell you about the frame of mind of people today? You know, is there an appetite for abuse? Are people trying to abuse the system, or is there just, you know, people don't really understand what their rights and obligations are?
And in reality, you find a mixture, and you find a bit of both from employers and from employees' side, that they maybe try to bypass a little bit the system or find some shortcuts. That's our role then to enforce the law, not only now, but even after the issue passes, we can also enforce even backdated. So that's why important to have your checks and balances in place. We have found a lot of cooperation from the general public, and I ask for that to cooperate a little bit with us, because we are receiving hundreds, if not thousands, of emails and calls each day. So as to try and assist all of you.
Maybe we need to do another session as well next week. I'm just seeing another question that I think is particularly interesting, so I want to ask it to you before we move on to the minister's last remarks. If a company is still making profits, can the employer still force employees to take forced leave or to do any of these other measures? And I think this is an interesting point, and I speak as well as an employer, because, you know, if the company is making losses every month, then it's shortening its period in which it could survive, right? So there could be an argument made for the company to remain profitable while taking these decisions. Is that true?
Yes, definitely. It's not just a matter of profit at the time being, and that's why companies are not putting off their people. These are interim measures, and we are taking them even step by step. So we're not going at the full end of the spectrum, but we're taking them step by step because the income of the companies and hence the income of the employees reduced because of this COVID.
Mm-hmm. Minister, maybe some concluding remarks from you about. I mean, this is only one aspect, right? When it comes to this situation, you know, you've got the health aspect, you've got the economic aspect, and then you have all these people falling through the cracks either because they don't have very regular employment, or because they're self-employed, or, you know, for whatever reason. Maybe a message from you politically as well to the people who are listening in terms of what exactly do you expect from employees and employers in this time?
Well, I always say that we need to be responsible. We need to be responsible and clever in the circumstances. In Maltese, we say "Aqal u li nkunu responsabbli." So that is what I really expect from everyone. The government is monitoring the situation as it develops, and we do not exclude any kind of further intervention if that is required. But abusing or trying to abuse the system is not the right time for anyone. I mean, we have to be sincere and open to each other, and definitely not try to abuse a system that, after all, the government is doing this effort not through the funds of the Maltese people and the taxes that we paid in the last years, but also through the economic development and economic activity that we experienced over, let's say, 6-7 years. And now we see that, when we talk about surplus, this is the moment that we can use the surplus, and we are going to use also even more than the surplus, because we are borrowing money also for this purpose. So I think that we need to be responsible, all of us, government, employers, employees. It's not the time that we try to not abide by the law, be it because of for health reasons or for any other reason. We are in this together. Let's say that we are suffering together in this with the hope, and we do have high hopes as a government. We need to be optimistic that the future will be better than the current situation that we are experiencing at the moment. So together we can really do a good job, not only during COVID-19, but also after COVID-19.
We're also getting a question about whether whether all of this applies also to government employees. I guess it's a little bit, Diane, maybe you can enlighten this point as well. Do all of the things that we said apply to government businesses as much as they apply to private businesses?
So employment law applies, and the remit of my department applies to private enterprises and to public sector, but not to public service. So yes, civil servant employees, excuse me.
Civil servants, okay.
They do not fall part of this employment law, because obviously there are other mechanisms which they have to abide to. But the department falls under its remit private enterprises and public sector, so such as authorities, agencies, etc.
Okay, so I hope we managed to answer many of the questions that you had, that our readers had. Minister, thank you very much for your time. Ms. Vella Muscat, you as well. I think this was really enlightening for many people. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to sort of conclude a bit the discussion with a bit of a roundup. So I think one of the most important points is that if you're facing changes in your business today as an employee or as an employer, the first step needs to be to have a conversation. And then to move that agreement, come up with some sort of agreement together, and then taking that agreement to the Department of Industrial and Employment Relations, so that these things can be managed in terms of what's legal and what isn't. Obviously, there are some things that are permissible for a company to do, such as impose forced leave, etc. But if you're going to change the working conditions of staff, and many companies, as we know, about 200 companies have already had that approved, so they're changing the conditions of staff, that needs to go through this process with the department, and that benefits employers, because it means they won't be exposed to legal consequences later on, and it obviously benefits employees as well, because that ensures that things are being done according to the law and not abusively. Obviously, I'm sure there are many more questions that people have. I just want to remind you that there is this email address, info.dier@gov.mt, which you can use, and there are also the helplines that we mentioned before. So thank you very much for watching COVID Calls again. We'll be with you again tomorrow, and until then, stay safe.